All right. Welcome, everybody, to another USMNT Top 10 weekend where we highlight the best performances of American soccer players around the world, mostly in Europe, let's be honest, because that's where the majority of USMNT players are based, and highlight best performances, talk a little bit about the future of players. We talk about past performances, current state of affairs, and try to answer some questions and basically just have a soccer hang. How are you guys doing? Welcome. If you have not smashed the like button yet, please do that. It really helps the channel to grow and helps other people to find these streams, which are a lot of work, frankly, and they take a lot of time. And I have to watch a lot of games, which I don't always want to watch to keep track of certain players so that I can actually talk about them like I know, right? I don't like to talk about players if I'm not actually watching them. So it is a lot of work. And, obviously everybody in the Patreon really helps. But if you can help by smashing the like button, that is great. All right. We have a very interesting question up here first from Nitin Singh, kind of out of the blue. He says, I don't understand why Scuffed, that's the Scuffed podcast, and Total Soccer Show were not explicitly more critical of Triple G. They were after the fact, but didn't feel like that during his tenure. Okay. Nitin, great question. There's lots of reasons for that. One disclaimer. I remember the Scuffed Soccer Show being critical of Triple G at times. They were, but not critical enough compared to the level of just complete incompetent that he was. And frankly, more often I heard them criticize fans more than anyone else. There's two reasons for that. One is access, right? Which I've said many times. Most of American soccer, when you understand the people who run marketing and media relations at US Soccer, who I have met and dealt with, believe me, they do not like criticism of any sort. They are some of the softest human beings on the planet. And I was low-key threatened by one of their members. And so I think a lot of people are scared that they won't be able to go to press conferences, or they won't get access to players, or they won't get to be in the mixed zone, or they won't get to be in the insiders club. And I have said many times, you don't need access to cover the game. This game is on the field. That is what you cover. You don't need, to interview Yunus Musa to have a great media outlet, whether it's a channel or a podcast or a blog or what have you. You don't need that. So being frightened of the officials at US Soccer never made any sense to me. There is another aspect of it that I think could have played into it, is a sense of trying to please everyone. Okay. If you're a podcast or a YouTube channel in American soccer, there isn't a big market share out there, right? There isn't a lot of fans. So if you want to make a living, which most of us cannot do, if you want to make a living covering the game in this country, you want as broad of a soccer audience as possible. Now, if you get too critical of Triple G, the soccer dads and the MLS fanboys, and then few other people would get angry at you, because I know this because it happens to me all the time. Right? People are like, how dare you, this, that, and the other. Okay? It's just part of the game. People are going to disagree with you. Some people are going to have different levels of emotions about your opinion or not. I think maybe in some cases there's a fear of not alienating anybody with having a strong opinion about anything. So straddling the middle ground, and there are some YouTube channels that used to do this too. Some of them are not even in existence anymore. But I remember very clearly they wouldn't really have a strong opinion. They would just kind of go, yeah, some people think this and some people think that. And they would try to find the most middle ground, the most compromised position, instead of saying what they really think. That has never been my personal style of anything, is I say what I think. And I'm sure some people have stopped watching me as a result. That's fine. I don't care. I'm not going to soft pedal what I think in order to gain a larger audience. Okay. But I think those are some of the things that played a role in why. But, Scuffed, for example, they also had, they were close to a lot of MLS journalists. They had Matt Doyle on the podcast, so they were very much independent media, but very much fell in line with, most US soccer media. Total Soccer Show, in their case, after Daryl died of cancer, they actually were bought by The Athletic. So they were about as mainstream media as you could possibly get. that's just what they were. I mean, I never thought of them as an independent podcast after Daryl died. Although even before Daryl died, they were more of a universal soccer podcast. They weren't really covering U.S. soccer exclusively. So that is my quick thoughts on why certain outlets maybe are not critical enough. And maybe some of it is they genuinely believe that Triple G had some good qualities. I think there were a lot of people that actually fell for the bait and fell for the bullshit when Triple G would talk about his advanced tactics and his PowerPoints, and they thought, wow, this guy's really smart, like hipster smart, like me. It's possible that there are some guys who fell for that. I never did, so it's hard for me to relate, but everybody is different. All right. S27 says, guys, we got to get these likes up. Nowhere near enough. Agreed. Let's see how many we have here. We have over 100 people in the chat right now, and only, wait a minute, 32 likes. Come on, let's at least get this to 50, guys. Come on. If you don't want Triple G back, smash the like button. The Jack McGlynn transfer is a Liga MX type move. Oh boy, let me quickly address the Jack McGlynn transfer. Okay. So as some of you know, Jack McGlynn was sold by the Philadelphia Union to the Houston Dynamo 2 days ago. Okay. It was not a trade. In fact, some people think it was a trade. It was not a trade. It was not gam, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. None of that. It was actual hard cash. $2 million from the Houston Dynamo to the Philadelphia Union. Of course, it's like McDonald's franchise A giving $2 million to McDonald's franchise B, because we know it. These are not clubs. Some Houston fan was like, I'm club over country. And I'm like, no, you are MLS over country, because you are just part of a bigger franchise. Okay. So why did he move? There wasn't a ton of interest in Jack. Okay. There was interest in Jack from Serie B and a little bit from the championship. Jack McGlynn has a absolutely wicked left foot. He is a magician with that left foot, both in open play and with set pieces. He's got an excellent passing range. He's got excellent vision. All of these things are true. Unfortunately, we don't see Jack McGlynn do that outside of MLS, right? He does not do that outside of MLS because he needs a lot of time and space to do that, right? So I was hoping that Jack McGlynn, who certainly has some talent, would go somewhere, whether it was Serie B or whether it was the championship, where he would be put under pressure because he'd be facing, players in a league with real stakes, where promotion and relegation matters, where, fans will get really upset at you if you don't keep winning games or if you don't perform well. But more specifically, as far as the tactics of the game, you, as a midfielder, especially as a deep lying midfielder, you get lots of space in MLS. You don't get that in many leagues in the world. And so I was hoping that going to one of those leagues would force him to either sink or swim in an environment where time and space would be compressed. And I think that's what a lot of us were hoping for Jack McGlynn. Unfortunately, the Philadelphia Union, which was somewhat out of his own purview, was accepted this deal from Houston. Now, it's a weird deal for lots of reasons. $2 million is not really that much money, but I think what really appealed to the Union was the 50% sell-on clause. So if 2 years from now they sell Jack McGlynn for $6 million to somewhere in Europe, which I don't know if that will happen, but we'll see, Philadelphia Union will get $3 million of that. So they'll get 2 plus whatever. But let's be very honest. The reality is there was not a lot of interest in Jack. If the interest in Jack McGlynn was from a second division Serie B side and a championship side, then there really wasn't heavy interest in Jack McGlynn. And I think personally the reason that is because they had the same concerns that I do about his ability to operate when time and space are compressed. Doesn't mean Jack can't be a good player if he eventually leaves, but also for McGlynn, this is the thing. He's in a position where we have a ton of depth. So to break in, you need to be absolutely pushing yourself at the highest level in order to improve on your weaknesses. Even if he only spends, I was arguing with this sweet kid. I don't know his name, but he runs the Keeping Tabs podcast on Twitter. And he's very upset. Because I dared to suggest that time and space matter when you consider a player's ability. And he was like, you've been saying that for 5 years. And somebody reminded him, I don't remember who, but also that I've been said that about many, many players, MLS lifers who are involved with the national team. And I was right about every single one of them. So it is true, whether you like it or not, whether you're offended or not, it is true that that was the truth. The thing about Jack McGlynn. I think MLS is his level right now. I think he could push himself and maybe become an Eredivisie player if he can learn to play at speed and under pressure. Staying in MLS, even if he stays for just 1 year, he's not going to improve on his weaknesses. Meanwhile, your Malik Tillmans, your Yunus Musas, your Johnny Cardosos, your Gianluca Bussios, your Paxton Aronsons, your Brendan Aaron, all these guys are going to be continuing to improve, and more will start to break through. Like maybe Pedro Soma a year from now could be a professional player. So he is now in an environment where his chances of really improving to a degree where he can be a part of the USMNT have been shortened. All right. His ability to be a good player as such that can contribute to the national team one day has taken a bit of a hit because now he's not going to be in an environment where he's going to improve. Right. So it is what it is. But again, as we continue to get deeper and better, if you want to play for the national team, you're going to have to be at the absolute top of your game to even have a chance to break in as we get deeper and deeper. And by the way, a year from now, who knows where Kevin Sullivan is going to be, right? Who knows where, I don't know. I mean, Pedro Soma, Kevin Sullivan are probably the central midfielders we're looking at, the most, but there are others that could break through out of nowhere as well. Musa started today, says Chris Marquardt. Despite the red in Champions League, Conceição really likes him. Could this be where he gets his confidence and takes off? Hopefully. I mean, there is, significant evidence that players don't peak until their mid-20s or late 20s, really. So he's still away from his peak. What's been worrying about Yunus Musa is that Yunus Musa has not improved much in 4.5 years of being a professional, right? So there's been some improvement, but not a lot, particularly as refers to his passing range and his production in the final third. Now you can say, Pete, as an 8, does production in the final third matter? In terms of goals and assists, no. But there's not much point in you being able to dribble through midfield to get an advantageous position for your team if your decision-making and execution on the pass is then poor, right? And that's been Musa's problem for a long time without a lot of real market improvement. Maybe under Conceição, we'll see. He needs to start showing those things consistently, although I thought he did pretty okay today against Inter Milan, right? Someone to keep tracking and watching. Look at A-Rob. A-Rob, at 27 years old, right, is killing it at a very high level. A-Rob at 22 was extremely inconsistent and heavily criticized for multiple things. So although I sometimes myself get frustrated with Musa, let's wait and see what that looks like 5 years from now. Michael says, Puli goal assist decreasing soon to Santi up top. I actually don't agree. I actually think, I think they overpaid for Santi, Milan. And I think their money was spent on Santi because I think they needed, central defenders, and they needed maybe a 6. But I actually think that having Santi there will be good for Christian Pulisic. It will probably ratchet up his assists. But we'll see how Santi does in Milan, because what many people are forgetting is that Santi's goal-scoring exploits are largely where? The Eredivisie. The Eredivisie is no guarantee. Being good in the Eredivisie is no guarantee that you will be good in a top 5 league. Personally, I think he will do fine because I think he is more of a poacher, Santi. He is the kind of guy who gets in the right space at the right time. He reminds me of Chicharito a little bit. Not as good as Chicharito, obviously, but that style of play, a sort of fox in the box poacher type player. So I think he will do fine in Milan, but I don't think he's going to be ratcheting up 20 plus goals every season, right? All right, let's jump into the top 10. And first up is Joshua Sargent of Norwich City FC. Came back from injury, had 2 goals in his last game, and then got a goal here as well. Played 84 minutes, scored 1 goal, 1 chance created, 0 out of 3 successful dribbles, 2 out of 6 ground duels won. This was probably the easiest goal that Joshua Sargent will ever score in his life. It came off of a free kick. It was sort of crossed in, keeper missed it completely. It was a loose ball, and only Sargent was there to tuck it away home. Again, sort of a poacher's goal, but most people in this chat could finish that if they were in the same place where Sargent is now. That's what people sometimes forget, and even I do this sometimes. Easy goal, but what's important? The instinct to be in that position at that time, right? So well done to Josh. And by the way, Josh is going to have a tough ask because very likely Pepi and Balogun will not be there in March. Pepi, there's still a chance. He's got a knee injury. Mid-March is his supposed return. But even if he does return, it's very unlikely he's going to be fit and sharp. So Sargent's got a big ask. He will probably start. I hope he will start against Panama and maybe have to help carry that team up top. So let's wait and see what Sargent looks like. But there is a lot of doubting around Josh Sargent, and fairly so. He sometimes plays well for the national team, but has been largely disappointing. I still think he's better than any of the MLS Camp Cupcake merchants that people try to prop up, because Sargent doesn't play in Camp Cupcakes. He never gets a chance to stat pad against weak teams in friendlies, right? So that doesn't help the perception of Josh Sargent. But if you look at his goal scoring record at the championship, which is not a top 5 league by any means, but it certainly is a top 10 league, he has been extremely effective for, well on 2.5 years now. All right. Next up, Brenden Aaronson. Played against Cardiff, scored 1 goal in their sound thrashing of Cardiff. Leeds look very likely to be promoted, either automatically or via the playoffs. Played 71 minutes, had 1 goal, 3 chances created, 6 out of 8 ground duels won, and 4 fouls drawn. Now, similarly to Sargent, this was a very easy goal. But similarly to Sargent, making that run at the right time to be in the position to score that goal is obviously a part of scoring the goal. It's not like you just stand there and then it comes to you and you go tap. So we have to give him credit for that. Brenden Aaronson seems to have found his level, which is the championship. Good for him. Not by any means a starter for me for the national team, but maybe, one of the last. My internet is acting up. My internet has not acted up for a long time. Ever since I switched, by the way. Anybody who has Spectrum, at least in California, I went from Spectrum to AT&T Fiber, and it completely changed the game. You guys remember how often my internet would freeze up and my streams would not do well? How often does it happen? I know it just happened, but how often does it happen in the last year, right? How often has it happened? Not much. So that is a unpaid for endorsement of AT&T Fiber. All right. Next up, number 8, Alejandro Zendejas of Club America. Played 76 minutes versus Juarez in Club America's second game of the season. Remember, in the first game of the season, he got 2 goals and 1 assist. So 4 goal contributions in the first 2 games of the season for Alejandro Zendejas, who seems to be picking off right where he left off, right where he left off last season, where he had a very good season for Club America last year. I was kind of hoping that would translate into a move abroad. But as we know with Liga MX teams is that A, they often overprice players to price them out of moves. And, B, Alejandro Zendejas is not 21, 22 years old. He's 26, almost 27. So that might put some European suitors off, because while he might be good for the next few years, it's not like they can have a big fat transfer fee when he's 30, right? So that might have put some people off, but I'm glad he didn't come to MLS. It wasn't the world's greatest assist or anything, but it was a well-placed cutback from zone 14, and I think they ended up winning this game 4-1 or something crazy. All right, number 7 is Giovanni Reyna for a back heel assist versus Shakhtar Donetsk in the Champions League. Played only 26 minutes, but got the assist. 4 passes into the final third, 2 out of 3 accurate long balls. This was a very nice assist from Giovanni Reyna. He had 2 guys on him and a teammate, as you can see here, making that run in behind. And despite the pressure he was under, it was a very clever little back heel in order to release his teammate. We can talk briefly about Giovanni Reyna. He still isn't getting the playing time that we would like him to get. And I think that in the summer, he should force a move. Unless Niko Kovac falls absolutely in love with him and says, you are my 10 for, which I don't think is going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. There's two things with Gio. Injuries have definitely hurt him, right? Not only in terms of not being able to play, but if you see now, he used to be able to take on players on the dribble, and he used to do it more often. He almost never does it now. I don't know if it is because of fear of getting, oftentimes when you dribble, you get tackled. So fear of getting tackled and thus getting injured again, or if that explosiveness is gone after the multiple injuries. I'm not sure which one it is. I don't want to make a prediction on which one it is until I know over the long term. So that's number one. Number two, defensively, he still does not do the work. He still does not do the work defensively. Even when he tries, he's just a step late to the press or to close down the player. And that is not going to fly with a coach like Niko Kovac, who is a very defensive coach. So I don't think Gio is going to be a guy. I don't think he's going to start for Niko Kovac. And we know that tomorrow the transfer window closes. So I would be very surprised if Gio ends up moving. But this summer, there should be no excuses, okay? We'll be 1 year out from the World Cup, and it will be time for him to move, probably to a lower club than Dortmund. A club that really believes in having a 10 and really believes that that 10 can be a big part of their attack. But there's two sides to this argument. That's a part of it, where he is behind Brandt. That's just the truth. But also, Gio has not done the defensive work. Right? And if you're a coach and you're leaking goals, are you really going to have Gio on the field? I don't know. I don't know, right? The other side of that coin, though, is when he plays, he fucking produces, right? I think he has less than 500 minutes so far this season. And how many goal contributions does he have? 3. His average, if you look at his entire career with Dortmund, injuries or not injuries, and you look at his USMNT record, Giovanni Reyna gets at least 1 goal contribution consistently every 2 90-minute periods. Okay? Is that enough to make him start at a certain level? I don't know. Apparently at Dortmund, it is not. For the USMNT, I think he absolutely should start. And I'm fascinated to see how Poch is going to use him, because if you listen to things Poch has said and you understand how Poch wants to play, on the one hand, Gio does not fit the Poch style at all. Poch wants guys who are pressing and running and closing down and making life difficult for opponents. Gio does not do that. Certainly not to the degree that you want. But on the other hand, Poch loves himself a creative 10 with freedom to create. And Gio is far and away the best creative 10 we have. Malik Tillman, Diego Luna, Miljevic, Brendan Aronson, Paxton. None of these guys even come close. So I am fascinated to see how Pochettino will use Gio. Will he start him? Will he start him in some games? Will he use him off the bench? And how will Gio respond? Because remember, even for under Berhalter, who rarely played Gio as a 10, right? His entire first cycle, where did he put Gio? On the wing, because he wanted to have that MMA midfield. And then, who was the first person to use Gio as a 10? It wasn't Greg. It was Anthony Hudson and BJ. And he thrived under both of them. Okay? And then, Greg Berhalter came back, used him as a 10 for 2 or 3 games. And then after he rescued his job against Jamaica in the CONCACAF Nations League, what did he do against Mexico? Where did he put Gio? In a double pivot. What did he do in Copa America? Double pivot. So for 6 years, he really only used Giovanni Reyna as a 10 for 3 to 5 games at most. Now, Pochettino, we know, loves freedom and he loves creative players. He doesn't want to joystick what you do on the field, especially in the attacking third. Pepi's talked about it. Diego Luna has talked about it. Poch himself has talked about it. And so I'm curious to see how, what kind of freedom he will give Gio Reyna if he does play him, and how Gio Reyna will respond to that. But I'm also curious if Poch is going to take one look at Gio and go, he doesn't work hard enough for my system, maybe he's a bench player, right? Either way, I think it's up to Gio to impress Pochettino, and it is certainly up to Gio to force a move this summer. Do not sign another contract with Dortmund, no matter what playing time they give you, all right? And get the fuck out, Gio. All right, let's move on. Number 6, Timothy Weah for Juve. Played versus Empoli. Played 90 minutes, got 1 assist. It was really more of a shot from distance, which you'll see, which bounced off Kolo Muani, deflected off Kolo Muani and into the back of the goal. He also had 5 passes into the final third, 4 out of 4 ground duels won, 2 out of 2 aerial duels won, and 1 foul drawn. This was a sketch of the strike. As always, guys, all these clips will be on Patreon today, in fact, with my commentary. All these highlights will be there. This was the strike from distance. It bounced off Muani and sort of rumbled into the corner of the net. It caught the Empoli keeper sleeping a little bit, but a good strike. And that is Tim Weah's 10th goal contribution of the season. So good for him. I'm rooting for 15. And this was him playing as a fullback, no less. All right. Number 5, Christian Pulisic of Milan versus Dinamo Zagreb in the Champions League in midweek. Scored 1 goal, had 1 chance created, 1 out of 3 successful dribbles, 3 out of 4 tackles won, 5 out of 11 ground duels won, 1 out of 2 aerial duels won, and 2 fouls committed. Now, this is the actual strike itself, but it was basically came directly from a press. The defender, the center back, received the ball and sort of fumbled his touch, allowing Pulisic to nip in, steal the ball, and then score. Now, Milan did end up losing this game 2-1. So it's still not looking great for the Rossoneri. I don't know why Gio's back heel is there, but it is. See, as you can see with Gio, the, double teamed, no problem. Plays his opponent through. Mark McKenzie. Yes, the center back situation isn't looking great. But it's certainly looking better than it was 6 to 8 months ago. Versus Nice, Mark McKenzie played well, played 90 minutes. They drew 1-1. He scored the equalizing goal, had 11 passes into the final third, 1 out of 4 accurate long balls, 3 out of 3 tackles won, 1 block, 4 clearances, 3 recoveries, 3 out of 5 ground duels won, and 4 out of 5 aerial duels won. Now, again, it was very much a case of right place, right time. As the free kick was played in, keeper spilled it. Mark McKenzie was right there to tuck it into the back of the net. Really what's been encouraging, although it was a nice goal, has been his defensive performances for, Toulouse in the French league, which is certainly a step up from the Belgian league where he was playing before. And Mark McKenzie continuing to develop and play in an environment, although in a back three, he played well and continues to play well for the most part in the French league. What's interesting is Chris Richards, who in my opinion is one of our 2 top center backs right now as well, is also playing in a back 3. And the up-and-coming Noah Kai Banks, who has now started 2 games and played in several others for Augsburg, also plays in a back 3. I don't think Poch is going to use a back 3 formation, although we might get moments where it looks like a back 3 if Joe Scally is there. If Serginho Dest is there, I think it'll very much be a back 2. So well done to Mark McKenzie. Speaking of, Chris Richards helped Crystal Palace keep a clean sheet against Manchester United. Poch does use a back 3. So let me clarify this statement because I can see this being hotly debated. Poch plays in a 4-2-3-1, sometimes a 4-3-3. Now, at times, it can look like a back 3 in possession with A-Rob pushing upfield. Now, we've really only seen this because Poch has been forced to use Joe Scally as a right back. And Joe Scally is much better as a stay-at-home right back, and it ends up becoming sort of a faux back 3 when you push A-Rob up the field, right? With Serginho Dest coming back from injury, I don't think he's going to have a back 3. It's going to be A-Rob and Dest. Now, how he's going to handle that is going to be interesting because does he want to use them as sort of alternating fullbacks? Does he want both of them pushing high up the field, since you have Tyler Adams there to protect the back line. It is a faux back three with Joe Scally in it, but with Dest and A-Rob, I can't see it necessarily being a back three. So yeah, Dest and Musa are fighting for the same spot. No, Musa plays as a winger for Poch, Soccer Satan. So Chris Richards versus Man United helped Crystal Palace get the clean sheet. He was very good defensively. He was not great on the ball, particularly with his passing. There was quite a few giveaways under pressure. And, there's some context to this. I want to talk about it, but let me finish the stats. 3 out of 5 tackles won, 12 clearances, 2 interceptions, 3 recoveries. Yeah, Pete, you're kind of dumb, says Johnny. I'm going to give you a piece of life advice, Johnny. If somebody is dumb, why do you watch them? Do not waste your life watching dumb people. Go and fly a kite or, learn pottery or join a gym. Do something more useful with your life than watching dumb people, okay? Played 90 minutes, clean sheet, 12 clearances, 2 interceptions, 3 recoveries, 5 out of 5 ground duels won, 4 out of 6 aerial duels won. Wes Smith. Okay, you guys. It's a back three, and Wuxia is saying we do a 3-4-2-1 under Poch. Listen. We have only seen Pochettino play that way because of Joe Scally, you guys. Because of Joe Scally. We have not seen what it looks like with Serginho Dest yet. Right? So you have to understand that while we think Poch plays a certain way, we don't know what that looks like with Serginho Dest back. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense to you guys? Yes, I understand that it has been largely a back three with Joe Scally there. But it's not going to look that way if what's his name? When Serginho Dest is back. Unless he somehow magically decides to put A-Rob in the back three, which I think would be a waste of A-Rob's talents too. So I would be very, very surprised if he does that. Okay? Anyways, Chris Richards was not great on the ball, but defensively, he had Garnacho in his pocket almost the entire game. And so that was very, very encouraging to see. Chris Richards plays in the most difficult league in the world. It's a very punishing league. The speed of play, the quality of play, the transitions. It is a very difficult league to play in. And he has gotten deserved criticism at times for his performances. But I do think people have oftentimes with Chris Richards ignored that none of our other center backs could play in the Premier League. And that if you put Mark McKenzie or Tim Ream or, Cameron Carter-Vickers or Austin Trusty or, God forbid, Miles Robinson or Walker Zimmerman in the Premier League, they would look significantly worse than Chris Richards. So although he deserves, criticism for poor performances, the reaction of he wasn't good in the Premier League, therefore he shouldn't play for us, is an overreaction, in my opinion. Okay. We are also like A-Rob. He is still 24 years old, although he will be 25 this month. And I'm hoping that we can start to see some stability and consistency from Chris Richards because, man for man, he's the best center back talent that we have. And he hasn't showed it for the national team recently under Greg Berhalter, but let's see what he looks like under Pochettino. I would like to see a Mark McKenzie, Chris Richards pairing against Panama just to see what that looks like, because that could be the pairing for 2026 as we go into it. Yes, Tim Ream did play at the Prem at one point. There's a reason he's now in Charlotte. He was benched in the Premier League for about a year and is playing in Charlotte, which is his level. He is very, very much in decline. So he cannot play in the Premier League anymore. No center back that we have can play in the Premier League. All right. Let us continue. Antonee Robinson of Fulham got his 10th assist of the season, playing 90 minutes against Newcastle. 0 out of 2 accurate crosses. Apparently, FOTMob doesn't think it wasn't really a cross to, what's his name? Raul Jimenez. So that's probably fair. 4 out of 6 ground duels won. 1 out of 3 aerial duels won. This is it was a one touch. It was played out to him quickly, and then he one touched it to Jimenez, who finished it quite nicely. And what a season Raul Jimenez is having for Fulham. We now have 2 clubs where we have both a USMNT player and a Mexican player who are going to have to work together for the sake of the club. And that is Raul and Antonee at Fulham. And obviously we have Santi and Pulisic now, and Santi and Musa at Milan. So this is going to be quite clear, or quite fun to watch. Last but not least, Ricardo Pepi versus Liverpool. But Pete, it wasn't Liverpool's A team, and they were already qualified. Yes. I'll tell you what, though, Liverpool's B team was also, they're trying to impress the coach and get minutes. So it's not like Liverpool's B team just sat back and went, sure, Pepi, score goals. No, that's not how that shit works. He played quite well. He had 1 goal and 1 assist versus Liverpool and created 2 other chances. Now, here's the goal. I'll be honest with you guys. I've watched this goal many times from many different angles, and I'll put this on Patreon as well. I'm not 100% convinced he touched it. Maybe he touched it. Maybe it deflected. I mean, I'm glad they gave it to him as a goal because that looks good for us, right? It's good for Pepi to stat pad, although sadly he is now injured. But I'm not convinced he touched it. And if somebody has a better angle, please tell it to me. From this angle, it does look like he touched it. But from a close enough angle, it's hard to tell because right when he was supposed to touch it, there was a defender sort of in the way. And yet it's a goal. And, you know, what's been consistent about Ricardo Pepi is the diversity of goals that he scores, whether it's headers, you know, tough shots from tight angles, good one-time finishes, not so many shots from distance, to be honest, but oftentimes dribbling into space. He has a good diversity of goal scoring. And that's been encouraging to see. And it just feels like now he was right on the verge of taking that spot from Luuk de Jong. And it is so ridiculously frustrating that he got this injury, not only for the USMNT, because we are, probably not going to have him for March, but also because it felt like he was right there to take the spot from Luuk de Jong. And now that he's injured, obviously Luuk de Jong is going to be there for the rest of the season. But personally, I believe Pepi should be their starter next year. De Jong will continue to decline next season. And I think that, he just signed a new contract with PSV until 2030, which is a big, big contract, right? It's a good extension, but obviously he's probably not going to stay there until 2030. If he gets 30 goal contributions next season for PSV as the starter and has a good World Cup, I promise you somebody's coming in for him for 60 million. Yeah. If that's the truth, for lots of reasons, right? Again, we don't Eredivisie goal scoring does not often translate to top 5 league scoring. Certainly not Premier League scoring. So that's something to keep in mind. But if he continues to score in the Champions League and does well in the World Cup, that will be reason enough for them to believe he could do it at a higher level. On top of it, Ricardo Pepi, whether we like to admit it or not, Ricardo Pepi is a very attractive prospect to European teams because of his marketing ability to 3 separate groups of people. Well, 2. USMNT fans, okay? Mexico fans who live in the United States. Because a lot of L3 fans are either born and raised in the US or came here or are second-generation immigrants. Their families support Mexico. And so they support Mexico too. But they are all very interested in Ricardo Pepi, I believe. A lot of them are, at least not all. I believe because they can identify with him. This is a guy who is like me. He's American, but he's from, he is coming from an immigrant family. He's of Mexican heritage and he's representing the US. And there are a lot of kids, of immigrants, children of immigrants who are maybe born in the United States or came here very young, who feel like they have a foot in both countries, right? Obviously, their culture and their Mexican heritage is something they're very proud of, but they also feel very American because this has been their home their whole lives, and maybe they identify with certain things culturally about America too. And so I think Pepi is a very attractive prospect from a marketing point of view because he straddles those worlds. And that is a huge, huge fan base USMNT fans and El Tri fans who live in the United States, and maybe even some El Tri fans who live in Mexico who are still intrigued by Pepi and admire him, right? So I'm not saying they're going to buy Pepi because of that, and they go, oh, start Pepi because of his, ethnicity or his background or his culture, but because of that, they're going to adds 5-10 million maybe to a transfer fee. Maybe not that much, but you guys understand what I'm trying to say, right? It is certainly a guy who is attractive, not just to USMNT fans. All right. Oh, this was the assist. I forgot the assist. It was a long ball, and he chested it down quite nicely for Saibari to finish it really, really well. And they ended up getting, 3-2. 3-2. They won this game, 3-2 over Liverpool. And all of the American boys qualified for at least the playoff round. At least the playoff round in the Champions League. So that was good to see. I'll be honest, I was very critical of this Champions League format when they announced it, but it's actually growing on me quite a bit. I enjoy the more games. I enjoy that more games matter later on. So I will happily put my hand up and say, I think I was wrong about that one. It was a little complicated at first, but now I get it. All right. Julian Vivas. So continuing the Reyna conversation here. I'm tired of Gio Reyna not getting minutes. I've given up on him. When you say you've given up on him, Julian, what do you mean by that? Given up on him as a player, as a USMNT player, as an ice cream buddy? Like, what do you mean? Also, what do you think of Aubameyang to Europe? I want to see Damian Downs in March. I would like to see Aubameyang absolutely crush it in MLS for a full season before going to Europe. If Aubameyang is the second coming of Christ, as some people are starting to believe that he is, and I disagree, at the very least, I think he needs to put up 20 plus goal contributions in MLS. Now, remember, this is not a young player. This is not a 20-year-old. It's not a 21-year-old. It's not even a 22-year-old. He is 24. Spencer Doherty is actually correct. It's not Aubameyang. You're thinking of a completely different player. It's Aubameyang. Thank you for the correction, Spencer. Yeah, I think that he is getting a lot of hype due to January Camp Cupcake performances. And I think we continue to forget, despite this happening every year, that Camp Cupcake performances mean very little in the bigger scheme of things. And Aubameyang has 10 goals in MLS at the age of 24 years old. I'll be honest, there are outliers who develop very, very late. But from what I saw of Aubameyang is that he is extremely technically poor and is just a freak athlete. And that technique doesn't really get tested so much in MLS, where defending is optional, but that at a higher level that will be tested. And because of his age, I don't believe very strongly that Aubameyang has a wide margin for improvement, just because if he's already in his mid-20s. But let's see what he looks like for Charlotte. He might prove me wrong, and 25 goals in Charlotte, and then maybe some team will come in for him. But I'll be honest, guys, Jesus Ferreira got 24 plus goal contributions for Dallas the year we went to the World Cup. And then he goes to the World Cup and stinks up the joint. At the end of the day, I try to look more at a player's profile and how I believe it could translate to a higher level. And what I see from Aubameyang reminds me a lot more of a Daryl Dike type of player, where very good athlete, tall, explosive, but very, very poor technique. And that can only get you so far. So as much as I think, remember, Chris Mueller had 3 goal contributions in January Camp Cupcake, and some people were saying he's a lock. Jesus Ferreira had the same thing, right? There's a lot of guys with goal contributions in Camp Cupcake. It's a relatively meaningless camp. So I don't really jump on the Aubameyang, hype train. But let's see how he does in MLS this year, and let's see what happens. All right. And as far as Gio Reyna, I don't know what to tell you. I think he needs to leave Dortmund as well. But I certainly haven't given up on him, because every time he puts on the national team jersey, he performs. Will Pepi be back for Gold Cup? Yes, he will be back for Gold Cup for sure. The question is Nations League. They're saying a few months. They're saying could be March. Maybe not March, maybe April. But the Gold Cup is not until June. So he will absolutely be back for Gold Cup. Yes. Is the championship a big jump for Wiley? I don't think so. I mean, in his limited time in Ligue 1, he looked okay. He looked like he could hang at Ligue 1. So I don't think the championship is a big jump for him. I know what you're referring to. There was a report that Watford were looking at him. Let's see if it happens in the next 24 hours or so, because, he needs to play, and he's not playing at Chelsea, clearly. And now he's back from injury. I think the championship could actually be a good move for him, especially now that John Tolkien is in the Bundesliga, fighting him for that backup spot. All right. Can you give us an injury report? P.S. You are a perfect weight and very beautiful. Wow. Thank you, Jeff. Injury report. So Serginho Dest is supposed to be back early March or late Feb. Serginho Dest is supposed to be back. Malik Tillman is out for several months. That was an ankle injury, I believe. Ricardo Pepi, they're saying mid-March. At least that's what it says on FOTMob. So I don't know if that's true or not. Let me double check that. I thought it said several months. It is not an ACL tear. If it was an ACL tear, he'd be out for a minimum 6 months. Expected return according to FOTMob is mid-March, but we will see. All right. Those are the only injuries that I am currently aware. Oh, Haji Wright is coming back mid-February. S27, MLS player to watch this year is Peyton Miller, left back for New England. Very mature, both tactically and physically, and technically decent. He's under 18. Yes. I was watching a bit Peyton Miller last season. He's very raw. Very, very raw. Good athlete. Very explosive. Is going to have to continue to develop technically. But at the age of 17, yes, or 16, I think. I think he's 17 now. At the age of 17, there's plenty of upside there for sure. Someone to watch. There's interesting players to watch. Neil Pierre for the Philadelphia Union. I'm curious how much he's going to play for the Union this year under Carnell. Obviously, Kevin Sullivan, how many minutes he gets and how he looks playing for the senior team, the MLS team at the age of 15. They also have CJ Oni, who might get some minutes. Frankie Westfield, we'll see how many minutes he gets. I'm trying to think there's not a lot of great prospects coming through MLS right now, guys. There just isn't. A lot of the guys that you might call prospects have been there for several years, like your Diego Lunas or your, Brian Gutierrez's or your Chris Brady. These guys have been there for quite a few years. Not Quinn Sullivan. They're not even really prospects anymore at 21, 22, 23. Prospects are like, who is breaking through this year? I'd say Julian Hall for the New York Red Bulls is someone to watch. Peyton Miller is someone to watch. We'll see if Nolan Norris gets minutes with Dallas this year. I don't rate him as highly as some people do, but I definitely want to watch him. Berchimas with Charlotte, I guess, is somebody to watch. I also don't rate him that highly at a pro level. I think he can be useful at a youth level, but I think a lot of his success on the field is still very much predicated on being very physically developed for his age. Maxi Carrizo, we'll see how much time he gets with NYCFC this year. He needs to make that step. He's 17 now, right? So we'll see, okay, maybe Nico Shakiris. We'll see. Then there are a couple of guys, not prospects, but how does Jalen Neal look, for Montreal? What does Caden Clark look like? Ben Kramaski. Yeah. He's been a pro now with Miami for about 2 years. So even though he's 20, he is still a prospect, even though because he's been around for so long. Berchimas, yeah, maybe, we'll see with him. I'm not as high on him as some people are. Somebody says Brian White is still in the mix. Duncan McGuire, guys, I'm going to say straight. This guy is a tronco of the worst form. There's a reason Orlando benched him last year too. This guy's a terrible, terrible striker. And I'm talking about from a USMNT perspective. I'm not saying he can't have some success in MLS, but from a USMNT perspective, I promise you Duncan McGuire is not it. He's also 23 years old, so he's not a prospect. There's a Reed Baker Whitting for Seattle is definitely somebody to watch as well. All right. Thank you, guys. This one went longer than it usually does, but decided to go a little longer this week because we do not have video. I'm leaving for Cancun in the morning. My girl and I are going for a week. It's partially a comfort trip after our pup passed away, and it's also because we haven't had a real vacation, just the two of us, in like 2.5 years since right after Qatar. And we need time away. So we're going to Cancun, well, it's not really Cancun, it's Playa del Carmen. So we're going to be there for a little bit. So there won't be a video this coming week, but then after that, programming will continue. All right, you guys, thanks for hanging. Smash that like button if you had not already. Thank you to BetOnline for sponsoring this video, and Patreon supporters. Thank you. The Patreon video will be out this afternoon of all of these clips with my commentary. You guys have a great Sunday and week to come, and I will see y'all soon.